Welcome to the latest installment of Brandon Brothers. I'm Doug.
And I'm Johnny. Today we're continuing our discussion about the Higgins-Berger scale of generative AI ethics, specifically the potential for harm.
All right, let's get to it.
And we're back. So, welcome back, Doug.
Thank you for having me again, I guess. Is that how this works?
Yes. So, we've been talking about the Higgins-Berger scale of generative AI ethics, or as we call it, the HBS scale. No, HBS.
HBS. There you
You
go.
don't have
The
to do
scale
the-
got redundant,
Right.
like AI.
Twice. Yes. AI is very redundant sometimes. So we talked about, we gave it a little introduction a couple of episodes ago. We talked about transparency. This is the second, or did we talk about
This is
number
the,
two?
This is number two.
Number two.
So,
This one is the P.
the
which
potential for harm. Yes.
Yeah. In your
Oh,
acronym,
that terrible acronym.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That everybody should remember
It's
about
it's
Doug
not
and Diggz.
Doug and Diggz
Intent to party.
but
Yeah.
it's not in the right order as we're doing them. I just realized that. So this is the P, the party,
Yeah.
but it's potential for
It-
harm. We're doing it twice.
Yeah, and I mean, transparency was the T.
It was.
So, here
Yeah.
we are.
So, is it? So this is. There's lots of aspects of these ethical, potential ethical pitfalls of using generative AI in business, especially when you're doing creative work on behalf of clients. And so we've kind of broken it into these different individual categories,
That's right.
which include transparency, potential for harm, displacement, intent, and data usage, right?
Yep. Privacy. Yes.
Data usage and privacy. So, and some of them overlap a little bit, I would agree.
Oh, I mean, I think that they all kind of intertwine.
Sure.
I feel like each one is able to live on its own, but it also has the symbiotic relationship with the other four of its counterparts.
So the question that I have for you is it possible for something like generative AI to work exactly as designed but still cause harm?
I would argue that the answer is yes, absolutely. That's why it's critically important for there to be some sort of guardrail in place when we're discussing what generative AI is doing and how it's being employed. So as it relates to each use case, that's really where we need to begin to analyze the 4 or 5 different levels of potential for harm, right? So starting with basically no risk whatsoever. So what is it that you're creating, but also has no risk as it relates to generative AI?
One of the most common complaints I've been seeing, especially on social media these days, is
Oh, I know where this is going.
is the use of generative AI to create flyers or stuff notifying people that your band is playing, or maybe for a restaurant.
What a perfect example of the place where there's zero real potential for harm as it relates to malicious intent, right? You'll notice that there have to be caveats
Right.
put here. But I think it's pretty safe to say that the people that are utilizing generative AI to create these flyers that are primarily put on social media
like digital flyers that
Yeah.
say we've got a promotion this weekend,
Right,
or we've got an event.
Oh, I mean, we see them all the time for restaurants, which
Yeah.
is
or birthday parties. Yeah.
and these are great use cases. These are great case studies, really, for these micro businesses, right? That these are the businesses that you're primarily seeing these from. Are there larger entities that might be using them? Sure.
Right.
Is there a potential for harm based on that proliferation? Absolutely.
I think that we need to do a little asterisk here because we talked about this in a previous episode, but when we talk about potential for harm, one of the subjects that tends to come up is the environmental aspect. And I think it's important
Mm,
to note that
grumble, grumble.
grumble, grumble. We fully acknowledge that there is an environmental impact on AI in general, water usage, power usage, all land usage, all these things.
Yeah, I mean, we can get into how the utilities are impacted, but at the end of the day, data centers are happening.
Yep.
Data centers have been happening. This isn't a new phenomenon.
Yeah.
But go ahead,
Yeah,
please
no,
continue.
also when you like the one data point that I always think about is when you compare, for example, the water usage of the cattle industry compared to the water usage of data centers. W- unless you're a vegan already, you don't have a whole lot of ground to stand on. If you drive a car, if you wash your jeans, you're using a tremendous amount of water.
Taking a shower.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
If you want to talk about a superfluous use of potable water, there are numerous that take place in the bathroom.
The point being that we acknowledge that there is a ethical discussion to be had here. We're just not having that discussion right now.
Yeah, and I don't think it is really relevant for the sake of our scale. The reason I don't feel like it's relevant for the sake of our scale is that our scale is specifically targeting creatives, right? This is to help them be able to use as unbiased a measurement as possible without these underpinning concepts of environmental protection.
So back to our AI flyers. So you're a small business, a micro business, as you said. I mean, we know several, small businesses like a Michelin rated restaurant, local.
Numerous,
Yeah,
yeah.
and they have been using AI to generate digital flyers. Um, and sometimes you see backlash. You see people putting in the
Yeah,
comments like, "I'm not coming to your restaurant because
right.
you use an AI flyer." I mean, it's some kind of it's a form of virtue signaling, right?
To an extent, but it's valid, right? So potential for harm is absolutely reputational.
Sure.
However,
So these businesses are making a choice to not hire someone,
but let's
but
also be clear.
they're
Let's
also
also be
DIY
clear.
type people.
Yeah, they weren't going to hire someone to begin with. What ended up happening is that AI created an opportunity that they didn't have previously because it costs a lot more per month to have a designer on staff or a marketing director on staff than it does to have a single seat commercial license for a generative AI platform. That said, is there a risk that comes along with it? Sure. The bigger issue is that 80/20 rule that we continually talk about, where unfortunately, because of the sake of expediency, these entities, the restaurants that we're speaking of, the entertainers that we're talking about, they need to get the word out. It has to be timely. And the reality is, if you have a marketing department, that requires planning. And oftentimes, when you're talking about these tiny restaurants, these independent musicians who busk or perform in restaurants, usually these gigs happen in a very short turnaround time where it's not even really feasible to minimally hire someone on Fiverr or Freelancer, one of those outfits, or finding a resource on Threads, right? It's just not viable from a time constraint perspective, but it's also financially not viable. How much is a freelancer going to charge for one of these social media flyers? On the low end, on the low end, you're looking at $25 to $50. Okay, great. Sounds awesome. How long does it take to get them to generate original layout design? And here I am, a designer, a
Correct.
brand strategist,
Right.
talking about utilizing AI in an appropriate environment.
This is your bread and butter.
It is absolutely. But you know what? These individuals, they weren't going to hire me, or another designer for that matter, because resources are slim.
Sure.
A musician might get paid $150, $300 for 1 gig.
Yep.
How much of that percentage are they going to give? They're already spending money on the gear that is depreciating in value for usage.
Right.
They're already spending money on transportation. They're already spending money on the actual mode of transportation.
Not to mention the years of training and experience.
And then musicians have their bills to pay.
Sure.
So is an extra $25 out of that $300 a realistic expense? And I can't in good conscience suggest that that should be done for every single one of a musician's shows. That's absurd.
And their talents aren't in graphic design. Their talents are in, presumably music.
Yeah.
And so, I, as a musician myself, if I interrupted and I want to let people know.
Oh, I don't forgive you for using.
I do work with a bunch of designers. But even in that use case where I do have access to professional designers, would I rather get the flyer out and get that checked off my list? And here's another thing is like, I know I could just type out that I'm playing a show.
Yeah.
In a text type social media post. That post can't be posted on Instagram, first of all. And I know algorithmically I will be penalized on Facebook if it's just a text post. Facebook's algorithm just doesn't show it to as many people. So already I have to add a picture. Historically, I have added just a picture of me, or hopefully there's a picture of me at that venue, but maybe there's other people in it that don't necessarily
But at the end of the day, there's no absolute means by which to completely eliminate the potential for harm, right?
Sure.
It's the only way to completely eliminate the potential for harm for using AI is to not use AI. So
sure. But can you these days not use AI?
Well, I believe I think it's pretty safe to say that we've been using AI longer than we've been aware that we've been using AI. It's just the way that the term has been packaged. I want to focus on generative AI here, where the opposite end of potential for harm is where we see deep fakes. And these deep fakes have a duality to them, right? So there's the side where it's a celebrity impersonation, where they've licensed their voice or they've licensed their likeness,
sure,
which has gotten really interesting with the voices of
James Earl Jones.
And then I think you mentioned in a conversation we had previously, not in the pod, but offline, about how they're like Tom Hanks, I guess, he was licensing his voice.
Well, he not licensing it, but he was postulating that if the existence of Toy Stories beyond his life,
sure,
it kind of scared him.
Interesting.
Yeah, he expressed concern about it, but the reality is that in 20 years we may not, God forbid, we don't have Tom Hanks anymore.
He's a treasure.
He's a but he could theoretically license his voice and
we know Nick Offerman is already doing it.
Yep.
The amount of times you hear his voice in a commercial, the likelihood of him having actually sat in that studio, we know there are platforms where you can, I can go right now and I can, using, I'm not going to mention the brand, there's a platform where we can go and license a celebrity's voice. Obviously there are limitations. They put guardrails in place that are already contractually protected. Mm-hmm. But then there's the other side. Where people are not using the licensed personalities.
Sure. And this is really potentially harmful in political figures. Probably the most, where we're seeing, a deep fake of a presidential candidate saying something, or a deep fake of a political commentator saying something, something that people trust is suddenly can be perverted into an entirely different message than that person would actually normally say.
Right. That misinformation component is one of the biggest potentials
Potentials
for
for harm.
harm.
Along those same lines, there's in generative AI, you can also have, if you're generating content, text content, or blog posts, manuals, instructions, legal briefs,
Right.
medical suggestions.
So so on our scale, we have 4 different levels when it comes to potentials for harm. And you're getting into that moderate risk gray area, right? So that deep fake where it's talking about it's a celebrity or a political figure saying something that they didn't actually say. Obviously, there is malicious intent associated with that.
Sure.
But then
Intent is a whole different section on the scale, but
right,
yes, yeah.
but obviously,
Potential for
it's
harm is there
symbiotic.
too. Yeah.
So when it comes to where you are now, now we're in that moderate risk component. So where it's really easy to transcend from low risk with guardrails, right? So a low risk with guardrails might be AI automatically generates a series of articles based on a prompt, but then there's human involvement that creates a guardrail to make sure that the information is factually accurate. It's unbiased, right? But then if you let it loose and you're talking about things that can potentially harm not just the reader, but also potentially society as a whole, we're getting into this murky gray area where we would say that that is a moderate risk with the potential to mislead.
The that sort of uh, area where the type of content that you're generating. So, if you're an individual company and you're using generative AI to post blog posts, to generate blog posts on topics that are related to your business, um, and you post, and maybe somebody reviews those posts, and you post that on your website. Maybe they do some light editing, but
By at least 20%.
by at least 20%. Um, you would that in our scale that would generally fall in the green area, right?
It would. It,
Yeah.
it it absolutely would. But then when you get into certain topics of conversation, like medical
Oh, yeah.
and legal, right? Where we're talking about industries where there's licensure that
Right.
is required. And it might even go as far as like in electrical work and plumbing, right? Where you are legally required to be a licensed professional. You shouldn't be allowing a computer that just basically takes pattern recognition and fuses it together to give across a message to inaccurately tell someone how to do plumbing work or worse, medical intervention.
We're seeing this more and more on YouTube where scripts are being generated, then the images are being generated, and then the actual voiceover is being generated. So you've got an instructional how-to video that has not been properly vetted by any human, possibly, and telling you how to prepare a meal, how to clean a wound, how to prepare for a legal proceeding. These are all very, very potentially harmful
Oh, the
ideas.
potential is high and the
Yeah.
slippery slope is significant. So, there are numerous avenues by which we look at what this potential for harm is, but there is a qualifier, and that qualifier is significant demonstrable benefit, right? So if we're creating articles that are informative, and maybe it's because we've trained a language model on our own repository that we've already written content for, and then we take it one step further and give it more training data, it's fine, generally speaking, to create content based on content that you already have created because it's already been vetted.
Can you give me an example?
No. So one instance that I can kind of speak to is we've used our own internal training data to help us generate creative briefs. So what we have done is we have created a set of parameters that help it not only reference existing creative briefs in our repository, but it also is analyzing a few documents that help to identify the core components that would go into the creative brief. So, uh, is it a 100% element? No, because we then go in and make
You don't
sure
just turn that over to the client.
no, absolutely not. Because listen, time and again, it's wrong, right? ChatGPT is notoriously incorrect, which is why it is absolutely critically important for there to be a human in the loop. Um, and so that potential for harm is another key component. I know we talk about displacement as one of our 5 metrics in when it comes to ethics, but that is a key component is eliminating a person because it's creating societal harm.
So, in speaking of the societal harm, I mean, there's an argument that says, well, if we continue down this path, um, people, the actual creatives, the creators of the world, will be less incented to create because the AI uh, will suck up their creative endeavors. They
Yeah.
won't be compensated, and why would they want to put their stuff out there if it's going to get stolen by these data hogs?
Right. So let's look at history. As someone who has a background in art history, I'm going to go to where we've been in the world of art. So over the centuries, we have seen artwork styles evolve. And at their moments of evolution, we have seen controversy. I especially like to look at what happened during the 20th century. During the 1900s, we we can go even further back to photography and video, the early stages of it, and then we end up in the early 1900s with these amazing photographers and like Ansel Adams, and then we fast forward and we have people like I think her name is Diane Arbus. These amazing photographers. They took something that was a tool and they created an art form from it. Another paradigm happened with digital art. So this is in my lifetime where I witnessed artists begin to leverage digital media in order to create art. When you look at the varying media, the oil painting is relatively new, right? It's something from like the 1400s. And we were mixing pigment. Now we have acrylic painting. Acrylic paintings happened in the 20th century. We did not have the technology. And so people could argue that acrylic painting isn't painting because of the craft. But the craft doesn't make the art. The artist makes the art. And we still have these movements today that are from a long time ago. We still have people chiseling stone. We still have people casting bronze. We still have people painting realistic, almost Renaissance style painting. So I don't think that the art movements have inhibited artists. I think what it's done is given them more tools, more media in which to explore. And I think it's probably just a matter of time before you see these amazing two-dimensional artists who have explored into video and immersive, like Derek Adams. I would not be surprised if his next level is to take his aesthetic and somehow infuse generative AI almost as a dynamic immersive experience.
You can actually tell the, generative AI in the hands of an artist versus in the hands of someone who is just typing a prompt and they don't know what they want and ChatGPT is great at taking any prompt and you say, I would need a birthday card, and you type the
Yep.
date and the time and the theme, and it will generate a very, very complex, sometimes overly complex
Mhm.
birthday image, with a lot of details that you probably didn't ask for.
Sure.
But in the hands of a designer, they can ask for something very specific and get generally what they want, right?
Yeah, I think the 80/20 rule always applies though. So when you first off, when you prompt something, I believe that the individual that's making the prompt is only going to get something that's about 80% as good as they are, right? So if you are an amazing designer, there is a likelihood that you can create something that is great. Is it going to be amazing? No, that's the next 20%. That next 20% is where that designer goes, okay, so uh, AI is terrible at margins, as Simon will tell you. And so not only does it not give elements breathing room, it loves to fill spaces. And so you're
More
not
tokens used,
it,
so.
it, sure, whatever it takes, right, to fill those pixels and tokens. And so I I think it's safe to say that a great designer is only going to create good design, and a good designer is going to create mediocre design. And you can see where this is trending. That the same is going to be true with a copywriter. If you're not good at writing, your ability to discern whether or not the content that you're getting back from Claude or Perplexity or Chat GPT, you're only going to be as good as what you know, right? So if you are expert level, you're going to have more discerning tastes.
Right.
That's just how it goes.
And sometimes 80%, depending on the use case, is gonna be close enough for what you want, but if you're shooting for something that is going to be, delivered to a client on behalf of you, that's 80% is not gonna be
Yeah.
yeah.
And there's one last point that I would like to talk to as it relates to potential for harm, which also makes for a great segue into privacy and data usage for our next conversation, and that is ownership. So when it comes to intellectual property, when it comes to copyright, generative AI presents a conundrum. And that conundrum is whether or not you are that potential for harm, whether or not your customer can trademark what you provide them, whether or not it is ownable because of where that source material is coming from.
And where the laws currently stand, if there is, it's a pretty gray area.
Yeah, it's still
It's
murky.
still very murky, but it's the law seems to be leaning towards, they use the terms like meaningful human input, or at
That's
certain
right.
percentage of, it's very subjective at this point.
It is almost along the same lines as parody, right?
Sure.
So where parody that you're creating a song, for example, and you're changing the lyrics, you have to change the lyrics so much
Right.
in order for it to be parody. And I don't know what it is about the music notes, if there are requirements in there as well, but I would imagine there's some degree of modification that has to take place in order for it to be considered someone else's intellectual property. So at that stage, again, I look to that 80/20 rule.
Yeah.
So is it okay for a designer to ideate using AI? Sure, why not? Is it okay for a designer to then have that AI generated design and bring it into, for example, Illustrator and automatically turn it into vector? Is that okay? No, because there hasn't been any meaningful involvement by the designer outside of the use of the tool.
Yeah, I recently saw an image that's been floating around, it's kind of a network of all the connected lawsuits going on between, publishers, photographers, creatives of all types, musicians, any record companies suing the big AI, every one of them.
Oh,
They're all
yeah.
getting sued,
Oh, yeah.
and in almost every direction, and that those lawsuits are not settled. They're still ongoing. They probably will be ongoing for years. But if any of those lawsuits end up and the law ends up favoring the creators over the AI companies, it could open up potential risk and potential harm for any company that has um, used generative AI
Yep.
for their products, for their marketing, for any of their, that there's a huge potential legal liability there. So it definitely needs. I mean, I'm sure all of the attorneys of the world are aware of this, or at least some of them. But when you're making creative decisions, this can have long-term ramifications
Absolutely.
for anybody. From the creative agency side down to in the corporate side. But fortunately for those micro businesses that we were talking about at the beginning, not so much potential downside.
No, not so much. I think that they're generally safe.
Yeah.
I don't think that anyone's gonna come after them for intellectual property infringement. It's not a good look.
Well, that the reputational damage of people saying, you'll see people, I'm not going to go to your show. I'm not going to go this restaurant. I think that's probably some temporary posturing.
I
There's
think so.
also probably the loudest voices that wouldn't go to your restaurant anyway, or aren't going to go to your show anyway.
Yeah.
Y-
And the flip side is true. These are the same people who wouldn't have been hiring someone to do the work anyway.
Right.
These are people that are on a shoestring budget and are likely bootstrapping their own operation.
Absolutely. So we mentioned that next time we're going to talk about data usage.
Yep, privacy and data usage.
And that's going to be a big one because this is what we're talking about, the training data, and this also has, it has lots of potential for harm. It also touches on displacement of other people's work and some legal ramifications. So that's going to be a very exciting episode. I hope you guys like and subscribe, and let us know how you guys are dealing with things ethically dubious in the generative AI world in the comments, and we hope we'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in to Brand of Brothers. Big thank you to our presenting sponsor, Remix, the branding agency, along with production assistance from Johnny Diggz, Simon Jacobson, and me, Doug Berger. We can't forget music by PRO. Speaking of not forgetting, remember to do that like and subscribe thing, and find us at brandshowlive.com and follow us on the socials at Brand Show Live.